try to explain what happened in the legislative session and moving forward, how we're going to deal with this redistricting in the upcoming legislative session. Glad to be here.
Thank you. I am Representative Tashina Lawrence. I represent District 77. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you all for coming out, taking your time on this hot Sunday to come out and hear what we have to say about legislative session. Again, I represent District 77, and I am the Vice Chair of the Delegation.
I'd like to thank you guys for coming, showing y'all support for our delegation. I'm Representative Kenyatta Hassel. I represent District 78.
Good afternoon. I am Penny McClaney. I represent the Great District of District 76, held by my late father, Representative Thad McClaney. I want to thank you all for coming out. It was important to us that we hold this town hall meeting today, because tomorrow, guess what happens? We go into a special session. We go into a 5-day special session. We'll get more into that in this next couple of hours, but I just want to say thank you so we can educate you all on what we've been doing and what we're about to face tomorrow. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Philip Ensler, House District 74. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see a lot of residents of the district here. Of course, everyone from throughout Montgomery and even those that have come from outside of Montgomery. To echo my colleagues, to come out here on a Sunday really means a lot. And as you all know, and we'll certainly get into this, being in the super minority party can be very tough at times. But we are doing everything we can to fight for our districts, to fight for Montgomery, and fight for the state. And today we just want to share some of the things that we were able to accomplish and be a part of, but also share with you the things that we know we need to continue to keep fighting for and keep advocating to make sure that we have the best representation at the state level.
Thank you, members. Just like Rep. Ensler said, and I think I connoted earlier, there was a lot going on this session. A lot of it was good, and some of it wasn't so good. But the session, what has been hailed as one of the most productive sessions in recent history in terms of the economy. There was a lot going on with the economy. Many of you have heard about the grocery tax reduction, overtime tax elimination, tax rebates, just a lot of money flying around. And while Rep. McClaney, with your hard work on the grocery tax bill, would you mind being the one to update us on some of these economic bills that passed this session?
I love to talk about this. Okay, as you all know, for many years, our former Representative John Knight has been a champion for trying to get those taxes off of our groceries. Many others after that, we've had Representative Brandon Moore, who's a Democrat out of Birmingham, Alabama. We've had now Senator Marika Coleman, who is a Democrat out of Birmingham, Alabama. We've even had others like my father and Alva Holmes, the late Representative Alva Holmes, that championed. And I could go on and on. But this has been a special issue that was hard on the Democratic Party. But guess what, y'all? 2 years ago, when we embraced it and said that we wanted to champion to get the sales tax removed off of groceries, GOP decided, hey, we want to finally do it too. That's a good thing. And so what we've done now is that we have passed legislation to start to restart rescinding the tax off the groceries. The legislation that passed this year was that over a 3-year period, we would have 2 cents come off of the grocery tax. Now, I know you all are saying, but it's 10 cents, especially if you live here in Montgomery County. Well, 4% of those cents come from state legislature, from state government. So we are only challenged to repeal 4% of that 10% or whatever your percentage is in the county that you live in or city. Starting in September of this year, you will see a decrease of 1% come off of your groceries. We want the whole full repeal of 4%, but we have to make negotiations and commitments to go to that. So we are seeing 1% again in September 1st. The following year, we should see another cent come off. Now, in the beginning, the issue was, how do we replace these percentages? Because the sales tax off the groceries goes into our education trust fund. Her education trust fund. I know you're looking at me like, why are we taking money away from our education trust fund? We need money in our education trust fund. And that has always been an issue and concern of ours. But what we saw as we were doing our research is that the education trust fund actually has a surplus. Not only does it have a surplus, I know you all may be saying, well, we had COVID money come in, so of course it's a surplus. And when we went back and researched, it actually had a surplus years before the COVID hit. So we saw that the education trust fund was trending upwards. So what we have done is we established a joint House and Senate resolution, and that establishes the task force. The challenge of our task force is to monitor the education trust fund. So we do care about our children, and we want to ensure that as we're removing taxes off of that sales tax, that we're still in a surplus or balancing our education trust fund for our children. The task force will meet once a year. We will also be monitoring monthly the increases and decreases that financials will be provided to us. During this time, as you all know, I haven't stopped with the full repeal or the full percentage. So during this time, if the task force realize that we have an opportunity to increase to 3% or repeal the whole 4%, that's our challenge, is to start making plans, give recommendations to the legislators and senators of how we can repeal a little bit more than that 2%. And if we see that there's a problem, other tasks is to ensure that we can balance out the money for the education trust fund, because that's the main goal, is to remove the sales tax, but also ensure that we have money for our education trust fund for our children. Now you all may say, well, was this really important? Well, I'm gonna tell you this, we were actually for this year, 1 out of 3 states, now we're not in that group, there's only 2 states left that still tax groceries. And so our goal was, if every state can figure out besides 2 or 3 how to remove the sales tax off of their groceries, we should be able to do that also. Because you all won't realize until you get your grocery bill at the end of the month and you see that difference. A family can save over $500 a year by repealing that sales tax. We also thought about those who spend so much money on groceries and those who may be elder or disabled or make minimum wage or less. How hard it is to go and see what you want to get from the grocery store. I mean, we saw eggs increase. We see butter increase. We see people that have to make decisions on whether or not they're going to get their Depends, their Boost, the baby formula, or buy food. That little bit makes a difference. And so that was one of the reasons why this was important. The public spoke across the state, and we finally listened to the public and started that repeal.
I just want to add just something really, really small. As she stated that this started with John Knight. He fought for this for years. Also coming up under a lot of other Democrats, we fought for it for years. And it was always a no. Well, this year when they decided to say yes, it was passed through a Republican. Of course, we supported it, but for years and for years, it was a Democratic issue, and we handled it, and the people before us came out really strong with different ways to put money back into the education trust fund. It was just always a no. So when you see it and you see it on the news, just know that the champion started with us, and we still supported it, whether it came under our name or not, because at the end of the day, you all are what matters.
Yes.
It's very much was a case of people knowing a good idea when they see one. So we're all about the results. So very proud of that. Rep. McClain, before I let you go, like you said, we had a budget surplus this year, and one of the things that the legislature looked at was putting money directly back into people's pockets. There's 2 ways, the overtime tax, and then 2, the direct rebates. Do you mind letting people know when and how much they can expect?
Most definitely. The overtime rate, that is if you work an hourly job and you work 40 hours a week. With that, if you work overtime past those 40 hours, as of right now, your overtime is being taxed by 5%. With the new bill of legislation that was passed by our minority leader, Anthony Daniels, now that money will no longer, anything over 40 hours will no longer be taxed.
That's big.
Then the next part was our rebate, more so because of, I guess it's the instant gratification for our grocery sales tax, that we will be receiving $300 back in the state. Yeah, joint, yes.
Yeah, Mary finally joined the $300, and I believe the date is in November.
It is.
Right after the new tax year comes in, so you can expect a direct deposit from the state at that time, some of that tax surplus money.
So watch out for your mail.
Well, moving on, we also, I'm sorry.
Can I expound upon the overtime tax just a little bit? I think when you talk about the overtime tax bill, you know, Alabama is known for being last in a lot of things. But this innovative way of saving taxpayers as well as business owners taxes is one of a kind. It's the first bill of its kind in the whole United States. So I'm glad that the state of Alabama is being known for first in something other than something being bad. And it was done by our very own Anthony Daniels, our minority leader. I think this particular piece of legislation is not only good for businesses, but it's actually something that our citizens can really see a difference. And it's an incentive to work more and and we know once our people work more and they have more disposable income, that turns more money to the economy. So I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. And it was passed unanimously, so that very rarely happens in the State House. You had we had 2 members that seats were filled, but you had out of 105 House of Representatives that were actually voted that day, 103 actually voted for it. So it was a great day for the state of Alabama, and I think it just goes to show that when you remove the R and you remove the D out of the picture, and you think about people and not party, I think we can make a great difference here in the state of Alabama.
Rev Lawrence, don't move that microphone anywhere. We're coming to you next. There were a few health bills brought this year, and truly, ever since COVID in 2020, we've seen an increased focus on health-related legislation, both in Alabama State House and across the nation. Can you describe some of these health-related bills that have come up? I know we've regarded smoking. I know we have new efforts to try to get medical help in rural areas. Can you give us a brief update on those?
Well, one in particular, I think this bill was derived from, if you all, some of you may be sports fans, some of you may not be, but during the NFL football season this year, there was a player named DeMar Hamlin with the Buffalo Bills. He suffered a cardiac arrest, and it was the training and the quick response that actually helped save his life when it came to him getting the necessary training and health care that he really needed. And so our very own Representative Jeremy Gray out of Opelika, a former athlete, played at the University of North Carolina State. He actually introduced this bill, and this bill will provide training to coaches, school personnel, as well as teachers to see and to how to respond to those type of incidents if in fact you have a situation where a player or suffering that type of panic attack or needs medical attention. So I think that's going to be great. It also provides continuing education for those coaches, all the way down to Little League, you know, so I think that's very important. That's very important because, you know, sports is a part of our daily activity, whether it's cross country or swimming or basketball or football. Those type of incidents can happen in any sport, and I think having those necessary precautions and requirements in place to make sure those individuals that we give our kids to on a day-to-day basis have the necessary training to make sure that if they're faced with those type of issues, they can at least address them and get them to the necessary medical attention that they need. Also, when it comes to healthcare, we know secondhand smoke is very deadly when it comes to individuals in their health situation. So, passed a bill by Representative Hollis that actually makes it illegal or crime to smoke or vape in a car with a minor under 14 years old. And I think that's another bill where we really just making sure we protect our kids, making sure we protect those that can't protect themselves. And bills like this, where you have bipartisan support, I'll say it again, it really resonates and it really does what I think we were called to do as elected officials in the legislature is make sure we look out for those that put us in office. And I think if we can continue to do that and put bitter partisan politics aside, that's when you can see the state of Alabama starting to rise and become first in a lot of other things other than the bad things you hear in the media.
Do you mind sharing with us about Representative Neil Rafferty's rural health care bill? I believe it's a tax credit for medical internships in rural areas.
Well, this bill came about because, you know, in rural areas we have very limited resources, but we also have very limited options in terms of health care and actually making sure that those health disparities are met. And I think this bill is an incentive to get those students as well as current practitioners or doctors or physicians to actually relocate into those rural areas where they will receive tax credits, because those areas really need that service as well. I mean, you're talking about, I live in Hannibal, and 30 minutes is the difference between life and death. If I had to come to Montgomery for a specific service, an emergency situation, that 30 minutes is very detrimental in terms of the possibility of life-saving efforts. But not only that, I mean, just the fact that if I need to see a dentist or if a woman needs to see a gynecologist or if I need to see an optometrist, we have some people that are very impoverished and having to not only find a doctor here in Montgomery, but sometimes transportation is a hindrance, having to pay someone to come to the doctor. It would be easier if they can go 5 miles versus 30 miles. And I think just having those type of pieces of legislation to really help those rural areas, I think you'll start to see those healthcare disparities kind of decrease and diminish, and you have productive citizens all across the board.
So we've talked a lot about bipartisanship, unity in the state house, and a lot of good, positive bills. But there was one bill this year that caught a lot of attention. It did not pass, but we're pretty sure it's going to come back in the future, and that related to voting and the absentee ballot process. Representative Hansel, can you describe HB 209, a bill this year that would have criminalized certain persons assisting with an absentee ballot, and some of the effects that it may have on our elections?
Yes, I sit on the Constitution Campaign Election Committee, and this bill came through our committee early in the session. HB 209 was made it, if you distributed, if you gave an application, if you even held an event, just the application of the ballot, the absentee ballot, if you had an event to talk about the ballot, get people to sign up for the ballot, this particular legislation would have made it, you become a felon. And it has certain degrees. For instance, even if you were handicapped and you helped your mom or dad with a ballot, And if that person gave, if someone say, look, I want to give you $25 for gas just to take my daughter to the courthouse. And if he goes to that courthouse and say, hey, my dad gave me $25 for gas to bring the ballot in, and they hear that, you will be classified as a felon. And AB 209. Now, I got to say this. We had a public hearing on that. I got to give the public a lot of recognition for this. We had a public hearing on this bill, and the public came out very strong. And I think that even though it came out of the House, it passed the House, but I do believe because of that opposition of the public, one of the reasons why it did not pass the Senate. I want to make sure I recognize the public for that and thank the public for coming out in that public hearing because it was a very good response from the public in that sense. But and I got to say what Representative England said. He said this is one of the worst legislation we've seen since he's been in office. And Secretary of State was now it's his bill, and my thing is he wanted to restrict voting because we was very successful in absentee voting. They claim it's fraud, and I asked in that committee meeting, where's the fraud? Who got prosecuted? I think they had probably out of between 5 and 8 cases of fraud, I believe. But I still asked, I want to see the cases. I want to see exactly what was the fraud to make legislation this broad to hurt people and call people a felon. You're talking about somebody helping somebody vote can go to jail, I think, between 2 to 5 years. That's right. It's the application. You're right. It's the application, and you're going to be a felon just to help somebody with the application. And it's a bad legislation, but I really thank the public. And so now I hope I'm not stepping out of line on this, but we also I had two bills to help with the absentee ballot. One was to cure the ballot, and one to make it simplify the ballot, which did not come out of committee. One didn't even see the committee, and one that I thought I had the support for that didn't pass. One was curing the ballot. If you made a mistake on the affidavit, and you made a mistake on your ballot, the court will let you know you made your mistake, so you won't make that same mistake twice. So we found out voters were making mistakes. They vote don't count. They do this every time they do absentee ballot, which is a mistake. So we came over to legislation to say, hey, all right, let's cure the ballots. If that person made a mistake, because we found out these people are not, their votes are not counted on multiple times. If we cure this ballot, let them know they made that mistake, then that ballot would count. They called West Allen. I got a call from Mike Jones, former Representative Mike Jones, and was like, this is a no excuse ballot bill, and they can't support it. So I knew that it didn't come out of the committee. They didn't see the committee. The next bill I had was to take off the questions off the application, because if you get an absentee ballot, those questions are twice. You see it on the application, then you see it again on your ballot. So it makes sense. If you check anything wrong on that ballot, on the application, you're not going to get a ballot. All right. So we if you take the questions off and just put it on take it off. If you leave it on the application and just take it off the affidavit, that'll simplify enough and it won't confuse so many people. And we got that idea from a couple of organizations and also some constituents. It was like, it confused me sometimes because I don't know what I wrote first, and I want to make sure my ballot counts. And so, but it came to committee. Even I got to give credit to the Republicans. I had 3 Republican votes out of that committee because they agreed. Again, but our Secretary of State, Wes Allen, got to some of those people in the committee, and once he got to him, the bill died in committee.
Rep. Hassel, I'm glad you brought that up because, I was there with you in that meeting, and whereas we didn't find fraud, and you were right, it was 7 convictions in the past 8 years, which is not a number that you generally make policy decisions over. We found there wasn't fraud, but we did find that there were massive barriers in taking part in the electoral process. I think turnout was 36% in the last election. It's a 30-year low. We're seeing a lot of people have those ballots that have defects in them, whether it's just a signature or whether it's forgetting to check a box. And then some of those processes that you put on your affidavit envelope are completely the same thing you already did during your application. I was there with you. We met with the circuit clerks. We met with the professionals and the constituents involved. found a partial solution, at least a step forward, and it was completely embargoed from committee. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Representative, you said that was communicated to you from a former representative, was the one that informed you that you were hitting the stop sign there, that it was being red lighted?
About
Or did I misunderstand you? Sorry.
yes, he's a former rep, so he
Trying to
worked-
understand the opposition.
Okay, Representative, former Representative Mike Jones worked at the Secretary of State office. He's the attorney for the Secretary of State office. And a lot of times you kind of, you kind of work your vote. You want to see what type of support or what would be the opposition. Because when you legislate a bill, you want to make sure that if I put this so you got to work. You try to work it out across the aisle so you can get it passed. So you can get the legislation passed. So when I talked to Mike Jones, he was like, man, the Secretary of State won't go with this because he deemed it as no excuse balance. And so when he deemed it so a lot of the Republicans will take his lead in that bill to oppose it.
Let me give a little pretext of why he made that statement. A lot of times in the legislature, sometimes it can be a problem. A lot of times in the legislature, when you have pieces of legislation that come before committees, say if you have a piece of legislation to deal with farming, agriculture, I just use that for example. You have these special interest groups, these lobbyists that are there to protect their interest. And so a lot of times, and this is why I go back to, if we stop kind of using a lobbyist to actually get our ideas or our suggestions from and think about the people, I think we can kind of deviate and get away from this. But what happens is, a lot of times, those committee members that is hearing the bill, the first question they will ask, well, especially in reference of when we're talking about alpha or we're talking about agriculture, the first thing they want to know, they don't even look at the merits of the bill. They don't even look at what the bill does. The first thing they want to know is how alpha feels about this, or how the farmers feel about this, or how it's going to affect the agriculture community. And it may be something that's great for the people, but because of those interests, automatically I'm going to be opposed to it, not on the merit of the bill, just because of the industry that it affects. And so that's why when we said it was a Secretary of State bill, so Secretary of State is the head election official in the state of Alabama. And so that's the first question that they wanted to know, well, how does the Secretary of State feel about it? And so what we do is try to circumvent that, and because we know that's the process, so most of the time we try to hand that off, and we'll talk with General Counsel at the Secretary of State to see where their opposition is or what they have, what issues they have with the bill before we even get to that point, to try to correct those issues or negotiate and try to change those issues so there won't be any excuses for the legislation moving forward. And sometimes, 90% of the time, politics always get put above people.
Thank you for that. That's a great question for the moment. And if I could ask you, can you bring that up in a little bit when we get to our Q&A portion, so we can maybe have a little more extended discussion about what it is to be a super minority and what it takes to be super when you are a minority in the State House. But for now, can we just hold our questions till the Q&A in just a minute or two, and then, but seriously, please bring that back up, because I know that's something y'all are very passionate about, and that hit on a really important topic for the moment. Before we move on to the Q&A, Rep. Morris, another area that we saw a lot of division in the State House was criminal justice bills. We had some good headway made with the body camera bill and a couple other adjustments, but we seem to have moved the needle in the wrong direction regarding prisons and correctional reform. I know in addition to being a state lawmaker, you are a subject matter expert in criminal justice, and you studied that in school. And so could you please share with us what some of these good and bad bills were and what their impact might be on our criminal justice system?
Yes. As I sit on public safety, so a lot of these bills come to our committee, and we have our notes because we see a lot of bills. We see a lot of good bills that don't make it. We see a lot of bad bills that make it, and we see a lot of good bills that make it, and vice versa for the bad bills. But we had a body cam bill that was brought by Representative Wonderland Givane, which allows for someone to actually go and ask for footage if something has happened to your loved one, and you actually want to be able to see it. The other part that was dealing with that bill that was we had to go back and forth with was like if something happened in this room today and I want to see the footage, but some of you all don't want to be on the video, right? You don't want someone to see you there, or and how do we go about getting those people out of the video? So that was something that we all, both sides came up with and sat down and talked it out, and now we have a mechanism where you will just only show the portion from the victim standpoint, and if someone else is inside the video, it'll actually be blurred out. So that was the part that was holding the bill up, but we worked it out, so now we have the body cam bill that was actually passed, and that was a good thing from the state of Alabama. And we also had a bill that was brought by Representative April Weaver that was dealing with reducing incentive time for inmates. Now this was a really, really hard bill because once you start reducing incentives, you don't give inmates something to look forward to, right? So we had a case where a young man, this is what brought the bill about. We had a case here in the state where a young man escaped from prison. He was caught, rebooked, and given a bond. And when he got the bond, he got back out and he killed someone else. So then they came up with the bill to reduce incentives for inmates across the whole board on their good time. And that for me was like, because when I said that, did you all come up with that was an inmate problem or an administration problem? That was an administration problem. He escaped, he was caught, he was booked, then he got a bond where he should have never received a bond. So instead of going to figure out what we can do on the administration side, we decided, well, they decided, not we, because we fought against it, but they decided that, you know, we're just gonna take away incentives for good time, and that's including people who may have been accumulating good time over the years. It went away. It went away. So it's effective after the bill was signed. If you had good time, it just went away. So that was one of those bills that was something that we had to actually try to hold the line. We tried to hold the line on that one. We also had a distracted driving bill. And I don't think that none of us agree that we should be texting and driving, right? I don't think that none of us say that. We should be texting and driving. We should be doing a lot of things while we're driving, trying to answer your phone. You see someone drop a phone on the floor and they try to reach for it. That's a bad decision, but I brought up the fact of if we're gonna go with distracting driving, because that's what it said, putting on mascara is distraction, but we do it. Drinking coffee while driving is a distraction, but we do it. So if you're gonna open up a door, and we've seen this happen so many times, that once you open up that door, everything starts coming through. So the first next component to come up might be you can't stop and get a sandwich from Burger King because that's gonna be distracted driving. So I think that for the most part, when we are targeting certain behaviors, we need to identify that this is what it is. So with the cell phone bill, it couldn't pass on either side. The Republicans in the House held the line with us in the House. So then they went and they got a Senator Jeff Wack. I mean, he has so when he comes in the room, a lot of people just stop and just look so that we have a distracted drive bill that came out. Just say that. And we had another bill that was by Christopher England. He's a Democrat that allows any municipality to permit its law enforcement officer to issue a summons and complaint in lieu of custodial arrest for certain criminal offenses. So sometimes you can, let's say like if you got your tag lights out, right? But you have court next week. You just hadn't made it there and you get pulled over in the process. So instead of them just locking you up, they can give you like a citation or a warning with that. So that bill actually came from the Democratic Party.
Thank you, Rev. Morris. And the last subject, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Real quick, if I may, I just want to talk about one more bill and with criminals.
Please.
This came in my committee. I serve on military veteran affairs, financial services, and judiciary. Judiciary, we have a standing committee, so anytime you have time or we're in session, please come down Wednesday, 1:30, room 200. We will be there. And so we had a bill come through that I know several of you all heard about, and that was the gang bill. I'm seeing my head shaking. Yes, the gang bill. And with this bill, initially, when it came through the House, they were targeting young people that if you meet certain guidelines, then you would get an enhancement because you would be classified as a gang. It would be a part of a gang. So questions started to rise of how is it these little criteria right here that you can now say this person's part of a gang. I'm going to tell you some of those criteria because I met several. If you live near, or if they see you hanging out with someone that may be someone that's affiliated with a gang, well, guess what? I've lived in my same neighborhood for 48 years. And I am very, very sure I know a gang member that I may talk to that say hello, how's mom and dad? So if 2 or 3 of you all are gathered together, in some way, even if they live in your house, let's say your uncle, your older brother, your father, mother, they are affiliated with a gang, and you are 2 or 3 of y'all gathered together, you all about the 3 gathered together. Then that's one criteria that you can be considered a member of a gang. If you wear similar clothing that may be popular gang clothing, you're a gang member. Now, I mean, how many of us may watch TV and that's the popular style? You know, I'm about to get there. You may have certain colors, like you know me, I'm Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So, a lot of pink and green that I wear. But my sorority sisters in here, we gather in hundreds and thousands of pink and green. Red and white, blue and white, purple and gold, I'm color, black and gold, but if you have the same kind of clothes on, or you dress alike, or you have some baggy jeans, I guess, or something like that, which I have those on, so then you could be considered a gang member. If you have a tattoo,
I'm in the game, man. I'm in the game.
if you have a tattoo that may look like other tattoos that a gang member may have, then you can be considered a gang member. I had to go look at my tattoos and say, well, let me go see them. I may have the heart, you know, and that may signify what a special gang or somebody may have. Oh man, let's not talk about the brand. So, if you have the Q brand and your purple and gold and you hang around with people, one person may have been affiliated with a gang, you may not know, then you are now a gang member. And so you can have an enhancement. So, it passed the House, you all. I'm going to tell you, it was 28 of 105 of us, okay? And I know we're going to get to that later. But it passed the House. But thankfully, once again, to the support of the public, it did not pass the Senate that way. There were changes made. And so when those changes were made, because we brought up the points, well, what about white supremacists? What about these hate groups over here? You know, I don't see them in here. I don't see them. And so when it went to the Senate, they added those things. If you're white supremacist, if you're part of a hate group, and you know, if it's a bad motorcycle club or something that you're part of, those are the things that we look for. Now this is still my issue here. They also took out every word in that bill that said gang in the Senate. I want you to listen closely. They took out every single word that said gang. They snatched out of it. So then we said they called it criminal enterprise organization. Criminal enterprise organization. Okay? Now, it comes back to the House as criminal enterprise organization. But guess what they introduced it to us as? The gang deal. And so I asked the question, why are we still calling it a gang deal? You know, because when we think of gangs, let's be for real, we think of young black children. Young black children. It is what it is. But they want to still stigmatize that deal as a gang deal. And I asked the question to the senator on Burford from Montgomery, Alabama. And I said, hey, since you took out the gang, why don't we now call this the criminal enterprise organization deal? And I have to give it to Senator Barford. He said, okay, then we'll just call it that. We'll introduce your committee. Come back to the House, and they call it the gang deal. So we're going back and forth. We're going to do an excellent job on the floor with that gang deal piece. Until the fact that the speaker said, all right, hold on, we're just going to have a private meeting back right quick. You all go in my conference room. Now let's talk about this real fast. Well, you all know my main argument was stop calling it the gang deal. Criminal enterprise organizations and every bill now. They said we got to call the AG's office to see if we can do that. I said, for what? We got to ask the AG first. They come back, they vote on it, and they come up to me and they say the AG's office said we just can't do that. We just can't do that. And so after we met with me, and I explain to the media why this does not need to be called the gang deal. Criminal enterprise organization deal. Make a long story short, the media changed the name to criminal enterprise deal. But the day of the signing, the AG turned it back to the gang deal.
Let me just add this. And some of this stuff is not new. If we go back, I remember in reformer days, and I was a teenager, and I remember Jump Street used to ride around because I had a high top face in a party like that. They took a photo or a picture of me and wrote gang at the bottom of it. I live in North Montgomery. So a lot of this stuff is still in practice in certain cities. So it's not new. And there's certain cities that's kind of divided, but I remember that because I asked, why are you taking a picture of me? And I remember the guy saying, if you don't take this picture, you'll get arrested. And because I had a high top fame with a part, they felt like I was in a gang. And they took a picture and kept it. And that's one of the things I did want to say until we filibustered enough that we didn't see that bill on the floor at that time. But that was in a game. And my thing is, I would have been classified as, if somebody would have been with me doing something wrong, because I've been identified as a potential gang member, automatically, I would have been in that bill also. I think the citizen would have been different if they would have found him guilty. I would have been, been with that person. I would going to be sentenced the same way as the guy that did the criminal activity. So it was some bad legislation on that too.
So let's end this legislative update on a good note, because I'm really excited to get to our reinforcement update and the Q&A. If Rep. Insler could share a couple of really important budget line items that the House Democrats were able to secure and explain some of the new and exciting things that we're going to do with those items.
Sure. And, to state the obvious, I know we're getting very into the weeds of some of the policy, and I know everyone here really cares about that, but just to put it in perspective, we're dealing with these battles and fighting this stuff every day, but we know that in the community and in our districts that people are concerned about gun violence, they're concerned about our children that are dying on a weekly basis, if not more, from gun violence. We know that there are people that can't afford to go to the doctor or get the health treatment that they deserve. So all of the things that actually matter to people, dealing with public safety and gun violence in a smart, fair way, dealing with Medicaid expansion, dealing with the lottery and bringing in that revenue, for our schools. Instead of getting to focus on actual solutions and things that matter most to people, we're having to fight all of this nonsense on a regular basis. And we're glad that we're there and able to do it, but we also realize that there's so much more out there, and we certainly, while we're often on the defensive, are continuing to do what we can on the offensive to introduce solutions to the things that actually matter to people, instead of a lot of this nonsense that comes up on a regular basis. All that to say, a small but important victory. Representative Passel and I were able to work closely with Chairman Garrett of the Education Budget Committee and got two small but important line items in there to go towards Montgomery Public Schools. I see we have two of our school board members over there. And the idea with these line items, they're essentially pilot programs. One that Representative Passel pushed for is to deal with a career assessment tool. So for young people to be able to take this assessment and help them better identify a career, a trade, a particular passion that they have, and steer them a little bit more on that track. So there's some funding in there for that from Montgomery Public Schools to support that. And then on my end, there's some funding in there to help a little bit more with conflict resolution training, particularly with the most at-risk or high-risk students in Montgomery Public Schools. And the idea is to provide some of the students that maybe have higher disciplinary infractions, truancy issues, maybe are coming in and showing certain signs of anger in school, something that I know, Rotai is here, and QB Ray and many others spend a lot of time doing, helping our young people. But this will help have specific counselors that are really trained in conflict resolution and mental health to work with a particular group of students from elementary up to high school that really need that additional support. And the biggest lesson from that was in the budget, there are ways, even if it's just a small amount, that's trying to get that in there to better support our community, to support our schools. And that's something that moving forward we can try to do even more of. And on that note, there were a series of bills dealing with gun violence that in the next session, there's some that the speaker has said he supports, there's some that committee chairs have said they support, there are others that may be almost impossible to pass, but I'm hopeful that we can get some of those through next session to at least address a little bit. We know that no bill or 100 bills are going to stop every act of gun violence, they're not going to stop every crime, but there are things that we can do to make our communities a little bit safer. So all of that to say, we're going to keep fighting, for you all, and I know that this is just one of many ways, as my colleagues have said, you all showing up, especially at the State House, that pressure does make a difference, and having you all there, especially for some of these nonsense, ridiculous bills, it can help and makes a difference. So thank you all for caring and trying. We know it's disheartening at times, but we're going to keep fighting the good fight.
I do want to add on some local stuff. We fought hard to get some projects done here. And I got to make it known, a lot of our leadership that's in certain chairmanships are from the north state of Alabama and central Alabama. The reason why a lot of our stuff to get funded is because of one of that reason. but we did fight enough to get $5 million for our Maximum White Water Gateway project. And so we still continue to fight to get the next 20 million. But we did get $5 million, so don't let nobody tell you that we did not fight to get funded for that project. We did. So, and also, what we've been working on too, the delegation been working together we got funding for Madison Park water and sewage, which they've been trying to get water and sewage for 50 years. Also, so we got to want that money from ADEM. And the next thing is that we're still working on certain things. We have a lot of hiccups in that, but we still want to get the flood area zones. That's in Hamer Road area, the flood area zone in Hamer Road, Hunter Station area, and also in Macedonia. Hopefully we'll get some federal funding on that, on the Green Water Project money to help with that also. But that's the good news that helped. I'm glad Representative Ensley brought up the career assessment program that he's doing. But money for the White Water Project. Let me just say this. That project is bigger than what it got really dumbed down with Birmingham Southern. Who simplified it saying it's just a water slide? You know, so I mean not water slide, but water park. Water slides, and they did a huge media blast to discredit, because the governor supported this project. Representative McClain and I sit on military veteran affairs, and the military was very excited about this project. The infrastructure piece that I was big on, we got 3-quarter bridges in this city that hadn't been repaired since 1950s. So with this project, it's sort of like when you build a new business somewhere, so you gotta put new roads. Like if somebody put a new subdivision or put a new business somewhere, so you gotta put new roads, you gotta put some new lights because it's this new project. So if you put this Whitewater project here, you know, it's just a catalyst of what can happen on the west side of Montgomery. And Commissioner Dean and I talked before he passed, and that was one of his main things. He said, look, man, I don't go rafting, but this project will help a lot more than what people just think of just water and Whitewater. So those 3 corridors where Heron Street, Mobile Highway, and also Fairview will ultimately change once hope we can get this funding, because the government supports this project. But once we get the funding, those corridors for infrastructure will change. And so now you put new bridges, new roads, new lights, so we can get economic development in those corridors. So, you know, we can put rest of Fairview. We used to have, I think we got McDonald's. There used to be a Hardee's. You know, it's a major interstate. KFC, that's right. So we hoping that that's the beginning of that. We change that corridor, you know, make it easier, accessible, that we can have more economic development on that Fairview exit, and also even Harris Street exit, make it easier to get to these certain places, that we can have big economic development in that area. Because it's just phase 1 what we see now. It's another phase. That whole area looks different. So don't let nobody create a wrong narrative, because there's a lot of different narratives out there. You know, don't let nobody give a bad narrative about this project. This project, it would be a great economic development project. And I truly believe, you know, late Commissioner Dean saw this vision surpass just a Whitewater.
And just to add to that, because I received a lot of phone calls about the money wanting to come out of Education Trust Fund, and why. Well, with everybody knows that dollar follows dollars, right? So it's going to be a big impact on the city, on the county of Montgomery. We're going to have a lot of people coming in that's going to be spending money within the city and the county that wouldn't have come. It's just like when you get up and you go on family vacations, you decide you want to go to Florida, you save money to go wherever it is that you're going and you're going to spend. Every area has something that draws people from outside to come in and spend. And one of the major bills that the late Representative Thad McClain got passed was none of the taxes are going to the state. Stay right in the county, right in the city of Montgomery. It stays right here. So if someone says that this is not a project for everybody, it is. It's going to benefit us, whether you white rafting or you just going to eat for the people who come in and spend a lot of money through tourism that's going to help build our county infrastructure. So just know that it works for the good of the entire county, not just a selective people like how we try to put it, but it works, it benefits the entire county of Montgomery.
And also the reason, I was in North Carolina last week. I worked with Young Life. I took kids, and so they have a whitewater facility there too. I call it the whitewater recreational facility, right? But they had a facility in North Carolina, and I was talking to some of the citizens there, and they were like, "Look, it changed the dynamic of the area. It changed the whole area." And Representative Morris, right? The tourism, people came from it's only 3 in the whole country, in the world: Oklahoma, North Carolina, now Montgomery. So this facility is being used for, and we got the biggest one. That's right, we got the biggest one. And so people are already looking at it for training. People are already looking at it for a lot of other activities, especially because I didn't know, it's sort of like runners, right? You know, a lot of people come all over the country to do certain 5Ks, 10Ks, and marathons. So you have organizations, they're like, we get so many whitewater rafting organizations, whitewater rafting organizations that come to that, they came to this facility and stay for weeks. They have what they call, they have tournaments. They have a lot of other activities that I was unaware of. And they was like, look, man, we got those same people like, look, we're going to come to Montgomery to see this new facility. You know, and so I was excited to hear that. So I think that was good.
So we set the table on a lot of these issues for our Q&A, and there's just one last one to bring up. It's probably the reason why a lot of y'all are here today, and that is redistricting, reapportionment. Thanks to the hard work of these people, all of you, the plaintiffs in the litigation especially, we now have an opportunity to redraw Alabama's congressional maps and restore the power of the black vote. This process begins this week. The legislature goes into special session, and the deadline for a new map is going to be Friday at 5 p.m. to send to the courts. Really briefly, what did the court say, and what is that next step in the process of restoring the power of the black vote? To whoever wants to take it.
Okay. First of all, we were pleased to see that we got a ruling from the Supreme Court for us to have a redistricting instead of Alabama. Got a clap for that. I'm not going to discuss the rest of the rulings out there. But anyway, we did get that. And I want you all to know, this is a very, very important decision that was made. I want you to know, I just attended a regional legislative conference, 15 southern states. All eyes are on us this week on how we handle it. All eyes. They even had a special session discussing what's about to happen in Alabama. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was 1992 when we first, the Supreme Court gave us our first Democratic or Black majority district. And so we're talking about from 1992 until now, 2023, excuse me, for the 2024 election. Now, what does this mean when I say redistricting? What does that mean? It means that currently we only have one Black congressperson in the United States, for the United States Congress to represent us. And you all don't know who it is, and her name is Congressman Sarah Sewell. That's right, you know it. And so the court found that Blacks represent 1 out of 4 individuals in the state. 1 out of 4. So that means that we should have enough districts to represent the people. I mean, out of all the 1 out of 4 of minorities that we have here in the state of Alabama, only 1 person is in Congress to represent us. And the court found that unconstitutional. found it unconstitutional. Now, if you all haven't been following, there's been 2 meetings already for our reapportionment committee. And they have one more tomorrow morning. And it's interesting. Here we are about to start sessions tomorrow. We have 5 days. Usually you can get more than 5 days in a special session, but they chose 5 days because the Supreme Court said we had to have a ruling by Friday, the 21st. Now, as of the one I watched on Thursday with the reapportionment committee, to my understanding, the committee has not seen all of the maps for us to choose from which one we're going to vote on. Let me say that one more time. The committee has not seen all the maps. It's going to be laid out. We got 5 days to make a decision. But they said, well, you know, our machine couldn't print all the maps by Friday. Yeah. All maps will be in by July 7th. That on Friday, our machine, we just can't print all those maps. Okay, but those, we have to choose between those maps. The committee has to look at those maps. To my recollection, we have the Supreme Court map, that one, the Milligan map. We have a Racy map. I represented Napoleon Racy, not Racy, I'm sorry. Senator Bobby Singleton's map. And we have one map that Dr. Joe Reed submitted, and he also submitted an updated map. But from my understanding, I don't think we've seen any of the GOP maps. Am I wrong? Okay, I'm just making sure.
Let me give a percentage of the map, right? I think it's the Milligan map, it's the Hatcher's map, and it's the Singleton map. So it's a percentage. And for me, it's kind of simple math. So if you want to get so both of those 2 maps, you got the Singleton map and you got, I think, the Milligan map, they got inmates. So they got 50, if they had 50% in one district, but you got 3% of inmates can't vote. So it knocked it down to 47%. So you got interest in these maps. What I mean you got interest in the map is, you got people say, well, Sewell don't want her map to be reduced from 58% to 55%. But in the new district, right now it's a potential. So what I like about one of the maps is, if you put it up to 53%, and you take away the inmates, it gives you a 50% chance of getting that Democrat in that district. So but you have to reduce, which is representing the Sewell district. It's called and we all did this in the State House. So this district, I'm in 78, Alabama, it was always an 85 to 90% Democratic district. Now it got reduced to 65% district. All our districts got reduced, I believe, but it also helped District 74 to become Democrat. Because that helped us, because in this county, it's a Democratic county. We shared the wealth. All right. But a lot of people are comfortable with that. A lot of elected officials are comfortable with that. What's the difference between 90% and 80%? There's no difference in an election, because you still have the majority. But you took that 10% and you put it in another area to get another Democratic area. So if you take 3% or 4% out of Representative Sewell's district and you put it in this new district, she's still at 55%. So that'll help. If you get up to 53%, it's simple math to me. You put up 53%, you take the inmates, so you're taking the inmates off, you're not taking them off, they still counting. But you know they can't vote, so they knock it down to 50%. And I believe that plan is a Hatcher's plan. But you do have interest in certain people saying, I don't want to take 3-5% to put it in a new map. You know, you got Singleton plan, whose favor was, I do believe his favor, he want to run. You know, so because we're going to hear all these narratives. We're going to hear all the Hatcher plan and Dr. Reed's plan because he want to see the Mayor Reed to run for the congressional district. We're going to hear that. We're going to hear But it's all, we can always say something about it. But my thing is, what's best for the people, right? If you do see a 55% district and a 53% district, and they get reduced to 5% on the voting age population, and that voting age population is 55%, is most likely going to say the same. That give that district a better chance to get 2 Democrats in the stands. In Congress.
And I do have this concern. As I said, we haven't seen the GOP map. And they want us done by Friday. So my concern is this, and I'm not a mind reader here, but I do have a concern that when we do see one of those maps, that it may appear like it's a 50%, 51% to the good for us to have a Democratic position. But my concern is this: will it be in the areas where there's going to be a low firm turnout vote? And if it's going to be in an area where we have a low voter turnout, it's going to look good now. Then that means we are going to turn their seats back over to the other side. And this is where it's important. I don't care if it's 53% to 51%, all of those. If we don't get out and vote, if we don't get out and vote, I don't care what the percentage is, we won't have representation. And you all might think that's not important, that we haven't seen those maps yet. But let me tell you something. We don't have to show up downtown this week. All 28 of us can sit at home and watch them on live stream. They will have a quorum. They can pass whatever they want to pass.
So, but let's not get confused. You're going to hear this stuff. You're going to hear the plans about splits, right?
Right.
Y'all, Montgomery's split 3 ways right now. We in 3 congressional districts. So let's be careful when we hear the narrative about splits, because what splits can do, Elmore County is a strong Republican county, but you have a black community in that county. So you're going to have plans you can see that cut those African Americans or Democrats out to put in another district. That's why it's split. So that they have a representation. So my thing is, and I like representation. If you well, it is called packing. But they get a representation because and a lot of people in Middlebrook, they feel like, man, we don't have nobody on the balance. We don't have anything that's going on because of the fact that it's a strong Republican county. But then congressionally, they can vote for that Democrat and who they want to vote for. But you have to cut them out. You have to kind of split that county to cut them in, to put them in that district, so you can they can be represented. So you're going to hear an opposition say, well, it's too many splits. So if you got too many splits, it's going to be narrated as a negative. But as I look at it, and this is my perspective, it's not so much of a negative because of the fact that for a long time, people are not represented because, especially Democrats, because it's very little Democrats in this state. So if we can get those people represented, and so it's not a negative thing if we have some splits in some areas, because they'll get true representation if we can put them in that district. So let's do your research on it, and there's a lot of discussion will be held on that. But if we can look at that as almost a positive in some areas, because those people be represented.
And I wanted to say that we do have a committee meeting tomorrow. I hadn't said it already. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And so if you are available, please go and attend that committee meeting. We start back at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Committee meetings at 10 o'clock. If you can't take off work, if you can't make it down, you can also go to AlabamaLegislator.com, I think it's org, and live stream it. And so make sure anything that we do while we're there, all our meetings, all our sessions are live streamed. So just make sure that you use that tool on the website so you can see what's going on, because I'm very interested in seeing what maps we have not seen.
Room 200?
200.
Okay.
Yes, so, as Representative McClatchy said, we haven't seen any of the other side maps. And they regardless of how many we think we want or what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, they only have to give us 50.1. And at the end of the day, if they give us 50.1 on the Democratic side, you have to get your people to vote. Because, and if you can just think about it, we don't like to look at it from the other side perspective. If it's just 50.1 and you have to draw it and you got control of it, you're not going to give more than what the courts told you. You have to give. So I don't like the point of raising, being fed hopes. I don't like that. I like to look at things in its original state. 50.1 is what they gotta give us. They haven't shown us any maps. They let us come up, they let us present whatever it is that we want to present. We get to talk however we want to talk, say whatever it is that we want to say. And they sit, they listen, they're good at that, very good at listening. Because you got a couple of people that you can go to the well and debate and won't say one word. They'll just keep bringing it right back to the same one line. You can say 100 words, they'll bring it back to the same one line. The Secretary of State, West Allen, he was in the State House. He was very good at that. Bring it right back to one line. You can talk for 60 minutes. He's still on that one line. So we haven't seen the other side maps. It's 50.1%. We are out here trying to get the best outcome. Are we going to debate it? Yes. Are we going to stand strong as one? Yes. And try to get what's best for the Democratic Party. But at this moment, it's 50.1 or close to.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces going on with redistricting, and the most important thing is just keep the eye on the ball. The reason why the court is sending you all back in the State House, and that's to give an actionable opportunity for black voters to elect their candidate of choice. That is the one clear guiding line that we have.
And just real quick, why the stakes are so high. I'm sure as everyone here knows, Congress right now, the Republicans have such a small minority. I think it's 4 or 5 seats that they have. So with the midterms coming up, with having a second, majority black or Democratic, district in Alabama, that can end up flipping Congress. And obviously that has national implications. So the stakes are incredibly high. I'm sure, as many people here know, one of the representatives that covers most of Montgomery, Barry Moore, right, one of his big things is he wants to abolish the Federal Department of Education. And for all of our Title I schools here in Montgomery that count on that funding, for all of the students that count on Pell Grants, for college, as one person, he can't abolish it alone. But this isn't just about voting for the sake of it. The stakes are so high. Residents, not just in Montgomery and Alabama, but the whole country. And that's why, again, we're going to fight as hard as we can, but are also realistic about what the other side may try to do.
Thank you. And so we're going to move into our question and answer portion of the town hall. We've laid forth a lot of issues right here, and I'm just going to walk around and bring the mic to whoever I see come up here first. And so please raise your hand as our people asking questions are concluding, and I'll come to you next with the microphone. But please give your name and, if possible, which district you live in when you raise your questions, please. Thank you.
Yes, Don Clemens, District 74. Is it my understanding, I know federal government told state of Alabama, you got to give us a map. Are there going to be 2 maps that they present to the courts? Or just one? It's going to be just one. And I just want to make a comment too. There's not going to be a safe zone this time, because 50.1, that's not a safe zone like District 7 is now. And like you've all already stated, is that we have got to we have got to get people registered to vote. We have got to get people out to vote this time because, as Philip just said, there is so much at stake here. And I just want all of us to know that we have got to get out and get our people to poll to vote.
I just want to say something about that. Not only do we need to register voters, we need to ensure that those people who are already registered to vote go out to vote. We have a very low turnout in this county. And so that's one push I encourage everyone when I talk is to call your mama, brother, sister, uncle, neighbor, cousin, church members. Encourage and let's put together a source that we can get everyone out to vote. It's important to register voters, don't get me wrong. And we have hundreds of thousands of voters who are registered and will not go vote.
Master Roseborough, two-part question. One, you mentioned splits, you mentioned numbers, you mentioned that you haven't seen the Republican maps. Do any of the three maps that are already on the table closely match what you described as in a low number, like the 50.1 and the two black districts? Because I know that I've watched the hearings and it appears to me they're aiming for a certain map that's already on the table. And then part two, what happens after Friday when the maps are decided? It goes to the courts, and then what happens?
If I understand your question right, as we were doing the discussion, you asked, the first part was which maps that are currently presented meet those criteria. From what I've seen, the one that kind of give them the bare minimum of what the court will require is the Singleton map. It has the least percentage in terms of Democratic or minority population in that map. And the second part was what's next in terms of, I think, once we submit the maps to the Supreme Court, to the courts, they have to make a ruling in terms of what we submitted to them. And if they see fit that that is not sufficing, then they will order a special master to actually draw those particular maps. And that's what I'm thinking is going to actually happen, because here in the state of Alabama legislature, they've never done anything on their own. Even the courts, we've been made to do what we do in terms of voting rights, in terms of prisons, whatever it is, we've been made to do it. And so I don't see anything different in this particular instance. So once we submit those maps to the courts will make a decision and deem whether they're suffice or not. And if they are not, then they would actually employ a special master to actually draw those maps. Now, in the case, if the map that the legislature presents and it says the courts deem that those maps are not sufficing, we had probably 12, 30, 40 maps that were actually introduced. The courts can say, well, we can use this map. We think this map makes the cut versus the other map. And so once we submit the maps, it's basically up to the courts in terms of the next step in terms. But they can accept another map that was actually submitted into the process. It's basically up to the courts once we actually submit the maps. And when I say we, I'm talking about state legislature. Did that answer your question, sir? Thanks.
I'm Evelyn Creighton, and I'm in District 76. What are the three maps? I was hoping that we would get a chance to look at the three maps. I only heard you mention the Singleton map and the map? Hatcher map. That's the Joe Reed map. Is that the plaintiff's map? Where is the plaintiff's map? I was hoping that we would get a copy of that. As participants to look at it, can we get a copy of the three maps? They weren't on the page. can we get copies of the new map so that we can make an informed decision or make some recommendations before?
What we can do, ma'am, what we can do, we don't have access to those maps right now, but if you sign in on the sign-in sheet, we can specifically get your name, and anybody else that actually wants a copy of the maps, we can get those emailed to you today.
Right. Part of the same issue that we've had with distributing maps has been the access issue that I think Representative brought up earlier. Is that currently on the reapportionment website and on the public record, we know that there are really, as Ashton pointed out, 4 maps that are now on the table being considered. As last I checked on the website, only 2 of those were available for additional copy. But we can absolutely get you the very best information that we have. We've seen copies of these maps, but in terms of publicly accessible resources, it's limited on the website.
And real quick, and my colleagues correct me if I'm wrong, but just a general breakdown, the Singleton map is the lowest percentage of black voters. The Milligan map, which that's the plaintiff in the case, is then the second, has a little bit more of a black majority, but then the Hatcher map has the largest proposed percentage of black voters in it. So those are the 3, and they are, I know WSFA and others have shared pictures of those online. So I think you can easily go online and find those, but perhaps for anyone that's signed in, who can email those out. Of course, then, in addition to the percentages, though, of voters by race, then some of the other considerations, though, are right. Does it split up counties? Does it split up precincts? And then you'll have some people that, will argue that you should try to keep counties as whole as possible or not break up precincts. So that's where, of course, there's nuance within them. But again, yeah, that Singleton one is the lowest percentage of black voters, then the Milligan one, and then the Hatcher one has the highest percentage of proposed black voters in both districts.
And as you stated before, the Milligan map is the map that the Supreme Court made a decision based on.
And the 2 maps that kind of match are the Plains map, Milligan map, and the Hatcher map. So those 2 are closer together than the Singleton map. I want to make sure you can say that.
Hi, my name is Alan Williams. I'm in District 77. So I was going over the legislative agenda, and I remember the Acquired Reform guaranteeing voting rights. And what piqued my interest was automatic voter registration at the age of 18. Is there any progress on that so far? And what will be done to implement that and sustain that as well? Because I understand that a lot of elections are coming up this year and next year. And I had the pleasure of helping Mr. Inster out with his campaigns, and a major issue was people who never registered to vote. So just let me know what this is about.
You said, what are the efforts being made to ensure that it's automatic registration?
Automatic voter registration at the age of 18.
Simply put, the Republican-led legislature in this state is not going to do anything to make it easier to vote. And by having automatic registration, that makes it easier for people to vote. And I don't think the legislature, well, I'm pretty 100% sure, especially with all of the directives from our legislature being given from Secretary of State that's been proven that he's about voter suppression. He's about doing everything he can to make it harder for individuals to vote here in the state of Alabama. So to answer the question, I don't think that bill would see the light of day at any time soon in the Alabama legislature.
Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Tabitha Eisner. I'm in House District 74, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Alabama Democratic Party. One thing that I think is important to say explicitly that maybe hasn't been said here today is that 20% of white Alabamians vote for Democrats. Not 2%, sometimes feels like it's 2%, but it's 20% of white Alabamians who vote Democrat. Election after election, there's some variation depending on the region, who the candidate is, etc. but 20%. So, for example, in Representative Sewell's district, that district is currently about